Hi, I'm Lina. Welcome to Lina's Storybook, where we share the most unforgettable audio novels. Let's get started.
I am a full-time wife with a monthly allowance of $20,000, and I spend my days jet-setting around the globe. My supposed best friend was so consumed by rabid jealousy that she seduced my husband, eagerly stepping into the role of the other woman, brimming with delusional expectations. She abruptly quit her demanding corporate job, fully prepared to take over my life of idle luxury and endless comfort. Little did she know, however, that this seemingly perfect setup was actually the beginning of an inescapable nightmare. The crisp autumn air of New York City whipped down Fifth Avenue, carrying with it the scent of roasted nuts and the exhaust of idling black cars. I was strolling leisurely past the gleaming display windows of Bergdorf Goodman, flanked by my closest confidante. Or so she liked to call herself, Lily. Lily was a recent transplant from the Midwest, constantly vibrating with a nervous, desperate energy to fit into the Manhattan elite. I, on the other hand, was wrapped in a beige cashmere Max Mara coat, an oversized pair of Tom Ford sunglasses, shielding my eyes from the midday glare. "Excuse me, ladies. Quick question for our channel. What do you do for a living?" A bubbly street interviewer with a ring light and a microphone suddenly blocked our path, signaling for her cameraman to start recording before I could even part my lips to speak. Lily eagerly shoved herself forward, answering on my behalf with a loud, almost overly enthusiastic tone. "She's a full-time wife." I slowly reached up, gracefully pulling down my sunglasses, and gave the camera a faint, unapologetic nod of agreement. The interviewer's eyes widened, sensing viral gold. She leaned the microphone closer to me. "Wow. And what exactly does your daily work entail?" Through my silk, UV protective face mask, I offered a soft, perfectly modulated reply. "Well, mostly private pilot sessions, visiting my dermatologist for medical aesthetics, and flying off to Europe or the tropics for vacations." The interviewer visibly froze, the microphone dipping slightly in her hand. The sheer audacity of the lifestyle seemed to short-circuit her usual energetic banter. She recovered quickly, pressing on. "And what is your monthly salary for this role?" Lily rolled her eyes dramatically, snapping at the girl as if she were slow. "Are you not listening? She is a full-time wife. There is absolutely no concept of a salary here." Flustered, the interviewer rephrased her approach. "All right then. How much money do you typically spend in a month?" "As much as I want, really," I murmured, casually twirling a perfectly curled strand of my blowout around an impeccably manicured finger. "But generally speaking, it takes about $20,000, just to cover the absolute basic living expenses." I could practically hear the collective gasp of the camera crew. In an instant, the tired, overworked pedestrians who had stopped to eavesdrop visibly stiffened, their fists clenching in silent, exhausted frustration. Taking a deep, stabilizing breath, the interviewer refused to let me off the hook. "In all your years, what would you say is the absolute biggest setback or struggle you've ever faced?" I tilted my head back, looking up at the towering skyscrapers against the blue sky, and pretended to think. I let the silence stretch for a full 3 minutes, the tension in the air growing palpable. The interviewer finally broke, her professional facade cracking into sheer desperation. "Come on, there has to be something that hasn't gone your way." I blew softly on my fresh French manicure, examining the polish in the light. "Oh, I suppose there is," I sighed delicately. "For instance, I'm not a very fast learner when it comes to dance class. Sometimes it's just so hard to remember the choreography." At this point, the interviewer became aggressively persistent, demanding to know the granular details of my seemingly flawless background. I obliged her, ticking off the facts with infuriating calm. Born and raised in Manhattan, only child, trust fund beneficiary with 2 fully paid penthouses on the Upper East Side. My child was taken care of by the grandparents, and a full-time housekeeper managed the chores. My sole responsibility in this world was to eat, drink, play, and enjoy myself. I listened to the interviewer's tone steadily deflate with every privileged detail I dropped. Finally, utterly defeated, she asked her last question. "How old are you?" Because of my face mask, the camera could only capture my eyes. They were bright, clear, entirely devoid of stress, induced red veins, and lacking even the faintest whisper of a crow's foot. I offered the lens a dazzling, crinkling smile. "I'm in my 40s, I chirped. In that precise moment, everyone on that sidewalk, excluding myself, simply shattered. I had fully expected that once the street interview hit the internet, a massive wave of vitriol would wash over me. I anticipated people cursing my name, doxing my social media profiles, and inadvertently driving a massive surge of traffic to my personal influencer accounts. To my absolute astonishment, the comment section was a monolithic wall of sheer envy. Not a single soul even attempted to question whether I was actually in my 40s. They were too busy wishing they had my life. A few days later, Lily came over to my Upper East Side penthouse for afternoon tea. Sitting on my custom velvet sofa, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, she let out a long theatrical sigh. "Victoria, you really just won the genetic lottery, didn't you? You really know how to be reincarnated into the right family." I offered a distracted, non-committal hum, my eyes glued to my phone as I endlessly refreshed my social media dashboard. My latest flawlessly edited travel vlog from the Amalfi Coast was underperforming, only 100,000 views, and the likes hadn't even breached the 20,000 mark. Lily slid across the velvet cushions, leaning in uncomfortably close. "Victoria, why do you even care about data and metrics?" she asked, her voice dripping with faux innocence. I pressed the lock button on my screen, casting the phone aside, and turned to her with a radiant smile. "Oh, I don't really," I lied smoothly. "I just enjoy reading the comments to see how incredibly sour the peasants are. It adds a little spice and entertainment to my day." She let out a hollow "oh," her eyes darting away. She quickly grabbed 2 delicate pastel laduri macarons from the tiered silver tray and stuffed them into her mouth. "Your imported French pastries are always so incredible," she mumbled, chewing rapidly. "The shipping for these must cost an absolute fortune." "Right?" I smiled back, warmly complimenting her refined palate and excellent taste. I then picked up my vintage teacup, taking a slow, deliberate sip of Earl Grey, pretending I hadn't just noticed the screen of her phone resting on her lap. She had the Google image search app open, secretly snapping a picture of the macaron box to check the exact retail price. Lily was originally just one of my followers. We met because we lived in the same city, and through sheer persistence and sycophancy on her part, she eventually became my best friend, a title she had aggressively and unilaterally bestowed upon herself. She scooted even closer, resting her chin heavily on my shoulder. "Victoria, why are you always so incredibly good to me? Being your fan is honestly the biggest blessing in the world." I looked down at her hand, which was clutching my arm, and gave it a gentle, silent pat, offering no verbal confirmation. A heavy silence descended upon the sun-drenched living room. After a few moments, Lily shifted her weight, adopting a sudden, uncharacteristic shyness. "Victoria, you're just so perfect. Your family must absolutely adore you," she began, her tone carefully calculated. "I came to this city all by myself to hustle. I don't really have any real roots or family here. I was wondering if you'd be willing to let me meet your family, to introduce me." I let the polite smile slide off my face, replacing it with a cool, unreadable mask. I locked eyes with her, staring deeply into her pupils. Lily visibly flinched under the weight of my gaze, shrinking back against the sofa cushions. Just as the tension reached a breaking point, I let my smile return. "Brighter than before, sure," I said smoothly. "I'd love to." I didn't waste any time. I immediately booked a private table at Le Bernardin, a notoriously exclusive seafood restaurant in Midtown, to formally introduce Lily to my husband, Zachary. Throughout the entire extravagant multi-course meal, I made sure to relentlessly flaunt Zachary's perfection. I boasted about his prestigious role as a senior software engineer at a massive fintech conglomerate, his astronomical salary, his platinum-tier stock options, and his flawless moral character. Zachary played his part beautifully, turning to me with a smile so incredibly indulgent and affectionate it could melt ice. Across the table, Lily's forced, polite smile was beginning to crack at the seams. She had spent weeks dropping subtle, probing questions, trying to figure out if my wealthy husband was some balding, elderly tycoon, or perhaps someone entirely repulsive to look at. To her absolute horror and intense desire, Zachary was nothing of the sort. He was over 6 feet tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored Tom Ford suit that clung to an athletic frame, devastatingly handsome, overflowing with wealth, and completely obsessed with his wife. And the deadliest blow of all, he looked incredibly, impossibly young. As the sommelier poured our wine, I caught Lily muttering to herself under her breath, her eyes burning with resentment. How does she get to have all the good things in life? Why is it so unfair? Why does she get this? Apparently, the sheer envy pushed her past the point of basic social decency. Right there at the table, completely discarding any pretense of boundaries, she pulled out her phone and asked for Zachary's personal number right in front of me. Of course, always happy to connect with Victoria's friends. Zachary agreed with a bright, charming laugh as he scanned her contact code. Lily shot me a quick, sharp look. A look of pure, unadulterated provocation. What she completely failed to notice, however, was the microsecond glance Zachary and I shared over our crystal wine glasses. A silent exchange of understanding before we quickly averted our eyes. That very evening, I announced that I had an impromptu first-class flight to catch for a solo spa retreat in the Swiss Alps, conveniently leaving the two of them alone in the city. I knew exactly what was going to happen next. It was practically written in the stars. Lily was undeniably attractive, and Zachary was satisfied enough to play along. Over the next few days, I fully expected their little secret rendezvous to become incredibly frequent, but Lily was ambitious. She wasn't just interested in conquering Zachary's bed. She wanted the entire kingdom, taking full advantage of my European getaway. She brazenly inserted herself into my home, aggressively currying favor with my teenage daughter, Mia, and my mother-in-law, Josephine. She acted like a woman possessed, prying into their personal lives to uncover their specific tastes. For Mia, who attended a ridiculously expensive elite prep school, Lily dropped thousands on limited edition Moleskine notebooks, imported Japanese Copic markers, and designer aesthetic stationery. For Josephine, a retired government official, Lily spared no expense, buying her tubs of La Mer luxury creams, rare wellness supplements, and vintage Cartier gold and jade bracelets. Lily served them hand and foot, burning through her own savings to shower them with luxury, playing the role of the devoted, perfect substitute wife. Zachary, playing his part to perfection, acted thoroughly enchanted. He encouraged her to slip into my La Perla silk nightgowns, leading her into our marital bed where they spent hours tangled in sweaty, passionate affairs. Lily genuinely believed she had checkmated me. She thought she had won it all to better serve her newly acquired family and cement her status as the new lady of the house. She marched into her corporate office and quit her job, refusing to even negotiate a severance package. She was ready to be a lady of leisure. However, the grand illusion shattered the day before I was scheduled to return. Lily had tied a linen apron around her waist, preparing to cook a lavish, multi-course dinner. Mia walked into the kitchen, her brow furrowed in genuine annoyance, and looked at the woman who had just spent thousands on her. "Auntie," Mia asked, her voice dripping with cold confusion, "why haven't you left yet?" The day I finally returned to the city, my family threw me an extravagant welcome home party. The moment I stepped through the grand double doors of the penthouse, Mia launched herself into my arms like a heat-seeking missile. "Mommy, how was the Swiss Alps? Tell me everything. Did you bring me any amazing souvenirs?" she squealed, burying her face in my coat. I laughed, wrapping my arms tightly around her and pressing a dramatic kiss to her cheek. "Of course I did, darling," I smiled, turning back to my mountain of Louis Vuitton luggage to retrieve several beautifully wrapped high-end gift bags. I meticulously handed them out. A luxury watch winder for my husband, a rare silk scarf for my mother-in-law, and the latest designer bag for my daughter. I even maintained perfect social grace by offering a beautifully wrapped box to Lily, who was standing awkwardly near the foyer. She was currently hovering by the entryway, holding a DJI pocket camera, like a hired servant, dutifully recording my homecoming vlog. The 3 members of my family acting out this heartwarming reunion completely iced her out. It was as if she were entirely invisible. They didn't even spare her a passing glance. In the heavy silence of the room, I could practically hear the sound of Lily grinding her teeth in furious humiliation. Once the cameras stopped rolling and the party concluded, I graciously invited Lily out for a private omakase sushi dinner, to thank her for her hard work filming the vlog. The moment the private chef finished searing the Wagyu beef and stepped out of our dining room, Lily's polite facade violently shattered. She grabbed the ceramic carafe of plum wine and aggressively threw back several large gulps. Her eyes were bloodshot as she slammed the cup down, glaring at me with pure venom. "You know Zachary and I slept together, don't you?" she hissed, her voice trembling. "You did this on purpose. You absolutely set this up." Tears spilled over her mascara, and she raised her voice into a hysterical, grating yell. "You were just so arrogantly certain that they would never actually betray you. Your entire family just treated me like a pathetic, entertaining circus act, didn't you?" Watching her unravel into a sobbing, pathetic mess, I actually felt a brief, fleeting pang of pity for her. I picked up my delicate porcelain teacup, took a slow, elegant sip of matcha, and decided to throw her a life raft. "Lily," I began softly, "you've worked in the corporate world for a long time. You've interacted with plenty of intense tech guys. A senior developer at a massive company like Zachary, yes, the salary is astronomical. But what about the crushing work hours? With that kind of intense, sleep-deprived lifestyle, their physical health and stamina usually aren't exactly peaking, are they?" The underlying subtext of my words was practically screaming at her. "Don't you find it incredibly strange that Zachary's chiseled physique and boundless bedroom stamina completely contradict the reality of a stressed-out, overworked tech engineer?" Lily just stared at me blankly. Her cheeks were flushed dark red from the plum wine, and her eyes were glazed over, entirely failing to connect the dots. She let out a sloppy, drunk hiccup. "Zachary's stamina is amazing. He is definitely not lacking in the energy department," she mumbled defensively. "He is way, way better than my ex-boyfriend." She then slumped forward, resting her heavy head on the polished wooden table, muttering into her arms. It is just because you're a rich local. You come from money. You have the funds to maintain everything perfectly." I let out a long, heavy sigh, realizing she was entirely beyond saving at this moment. I raised a hand to signal the waiter for the check. It was abundantly clear she wasn't going to sober up and face reality anytime soon. After losing her corporate job, Lily completely abandoned the idea of updating her resume or looking for a new position. Instead, she blew a massive chunk of her hard-earned savings to rent a smaller, aggressively modern unit on a lower floor of my exclusive Upper East Side luxury building. She meticulously analyzed the designer brands that casually appeared in my vlogs, hunting down high-quality, one-to-one replica cosmetics and fake Hermes Birkin bags. Armed with her counterfeit luxury, she desperately tried to break into the local circle of ultra-wealthy Manhattan socialites. She was undeniably pretty, and paired with her head-to-toe fake designer wardrobe, she looked the part well enough to fool a passing glance. Initially, a few women in the private residence lounge did strike up polite conversations with her. However, it didn't take long for these seasoned socialites to realize that beneath the glossy veneer, Lily was entirely empty. She possessed no real connections, no insider information, and could offer them absolutely zero leverage or assistance. Once they realized she lacked any real social value, they universally distanced themselves, treating her with polite but freezing indifference. Lily was pacing the lobby like a caged animal, frantic and isolated. Finally, unable to cope with the mounting pressure and rejection, she bought a bottle of cheap vodka and drank herself into a stupor. She was wandering through the building's perfectly manicured private courtyard like a lost ghost when the night security detail found her. They were just about to forcefully eject her from the premises as a suspicious trespasser when I happened to walk by, extending a gracious hand to intervene and stop the guards. The shock of nearly being thrown out sobered Lily up considerably. She tilted her head up, her makeup slightly smeared, and shot me a resentful glare. "Oh, it is you," she slurred. I crouched down gracefully, my silk trench coat pooling around my ankles, and guided her to sit on a cold stone bench near the landscaping. "How is the networking going? Smooth sailing?" I asked, my voice laced with mild, practiced concern. She shot me a venomous look and let out a cold, bitter scoff. "Not smooth at all. All those little tricks and sweet-talking tactics I used when we hung out. They don't work on these wives at all. Not even a little bit." I tilted my head, feigning attentive ignorance. "Oh, is that so?" Lily forced herself to sit upright, leaning heavily against the wrought iron pillar of a nearby gazebo. She began counting off her grievances on her fingers, her voice dripping with frustration. "Take Mrs. Sterling from the penthouse tier. She has billions in assets, yet every single day she is furiously networking, trying to sniff out new business opportunities and secure high-profile clients for her husband's private equity firm. And then there is Beatrice from the townhouses. Every time she opens her mouth, it's a manic spiral about her kids' academics, securing spots at Oxford summer programs, bribing admissions consultants, obsessing over Ivy League early decisions." Lily waved her hands dismissively, letting out a heavy alcohol-laced hiccup. "I don't understand half of what they're talking about. I can't help them with any of it, so they just kicked me out of the circle after 3 sentences." I let out a long drawn-out, "Oh, why didn't you ever tell me any of this before?" Lily's eyes brimmed with red, frustrated tears. "You made me believe that being a rich wife meant you just got to be perfectly comfortable every single day. I quit my job completely unprepared for this reality." I reached out and tapped her lightly on the nose with my perfectly manicured index finger. "It is not that I was keeping secrets from you, Lily. It is just that I genuinely don't have to do any of those stressful things." Lily's eyes widened in horror as the realization hit her, my carefully curated internet persona flashing before her eyes. Right. You don't raise your kid, and you don't care at all about your husband's corporate career. Your only responsibility in life is to eat, drink, play, and enjoy yourself." Suddenly, the last remnants of her drunken haze vanished. She lunged forward, looking as though she wanted nothing more than to wrap her hands around my throat and strangle me. "So why?" she screamed into the night air. "Why do women who are infinitely wealthier and possess far higher social status than you have to constantly grind and sacrifice, while you get to sit around stressing over absolutely nothing, purely enjoying life?" I couldn't help it. I threw my head back and laughed a clear bell-like sound. "Exactly, why is that?" I mused. "Why would Zachary, a man who supposedly grinds himself into the ground to earn millions, happily let me lie around the penthouse doing absolutely nothing but draining his bank account? Why would my ultra-wealthy, hardworking parents buy me multi-million-dollar real estate, only to sit back and watch me be utterly useless, eating away at my trust fund? Why is everyone else in this building ruthlessly strategizing for their children's futures, while I supposedly abandon my daughter to fly off on permanent European vacations?" I leaned in close, my lips hovering right next to her ear. "Doesn't it all feel just a little bit contradictory?" Lily shrieked, a hysterical defensive sound. "Because you just got lucky. You won the genetic lottery and stumbled into a perfect life." I stood up slowly, brushing an imaginary speck of dust off my coat, and shook my head in utter boredom. "You are truly beyond saving. Use your brain for a second. Even the most powerful billionaires and monarchs in the world, people at the absolute pinnacle of human existence, still have unmet desires. They still fear aging. They still crave more power. How could I, a totally ordinary woman with a bit of cash, possibly live a life completely devoid of friction? A life where every single desire is effortlessly met, with absolutely zero setbacks." Lily's pupils dilated in shock, staring up at me from the cold stone. Under the dim, flickering glow of the courtyard lamplight, I stretched my lips into a wide predatory smile. "You are so stupid. If you're genuinely willing to believe my heavily edited internet persona is real life, you might as well believe that I'm the Queen of England. Lily vanished without a trace for 2 agonizing days, only to storm back into my penthouse with the furious momentum of a hurricane. The second she shoved the front door open, she pointed a trembling finger straight at my daughter's nose and started screaming. "You're not a student at an elite prep school, at all. You made me buy you thousands of dollars worth of imported stationery. And it turns out you're just a study aesthetic influencer on TikTok." Mia just crossed her arms over her chest, letting out a nonchalant, unbothered laugh. "And you?" Lily immediately pivoted, aiming her wrath at my mother-in-law, her face contorted with rage. "You made me buy you expensive Cartier gold and vintage jade bracelets. And it was all just so you could use them as props to shoot catalog ads for cheap fast fashion senior clothing on Facebook." Josephine casually admired her manicured wrist, twisting the shiny bracelet in the light. "Well, yes and no. I genuinely do love fine jewelry. I'd wear it even if the cameras weren't rolling," she replied smoothly. Finally, Lily turned her manic gaze toward Zachary and me. It was a Tuesday, well past 11 a.m., and Zachary was still lounging casually on the living room sofa in silk pajamas. A fact that, in itself, spoke volumes about his supposed high-pressure corporate tech job. But because she hadn't yet found definitive, undeniable proof regarding him, Lily clung to a final pathetic shred of hope, with tears streaming down her face. She looked at him, her voice cracking. You're real, right? What we had." Zachary flashed her a blinding, perfectly veneered smile, pulled out his iPhone, and loaded up his public profile. Lily's vision went black for a terrifying second. The man she had wholeheartedly believed was an elite intellectual tech executive was currently on the screen, his dress shirt unbuttoned to his navel, biting his lip and body rolling to a trending hip-hop audio with absolute shameless enthusiasm. It was a soft-core thirst trap profile, so aggressively cringe-inducing it practically radiated a digital STD. I happily delivered the final fatal blow. He's a fitness and thirst trap influencer on TikTok. You've probably scrolled past him on your For You page before. Lily looked like she was about to vomit. The lighting in his videos is so dark, and he is twisting his body into a pretzel. "How was anyone supposed to recognize him?" she cried. I rubbed my chin, nodding in solemn agreement. True, much like cheap meat placed under a butcher's flattering neon light. It completely alters the presentation. "I can't blame you for being fooled." Zachary glared at me, puffing out his cheeks in offense, clearly outraged that I would compare his meticulously moisturized and gym-sculpted physique to a slab of raw meat. Finally, Lily's horrified, shell-shocked gaze slowly dragged over to me. I flashed her a brilliantly white predatory smile. "Don't panic too much. While my family and my perfect persona are entirely fabricated, the money is very, very real." Lily nodded frantically, her chest heaving. "I know that. I saw your bank statements." But then she shrank back, pressing herself against the marble entryway wall, her eyes wide with mounting terror. "But the more I think about it, the more terrified I get. These past few weeks you did this on purpose. You deliberately gave me the opportunity to get close to you. And you intentionally let that internet stripper sleep with me." She stuttered, her voice dropping to a frightened whisper. And your entire family is fake. What is your goal? What do you want from me?" "Don't be scared," I cooed, stepping closer. I reached out and gently patted the back of her trembling hand, exactly the same way I had done so many times, when she was pretending to be my sweet, supportive best friend. "I simply wanted to borrow your hands for a little while." The very next morning, precisely at 6 a.m., Lily was standing in my massive marble-clad kitchen, cooking breakfast. This time, the roles were reversed. I was the one standing behind the camera rig, meticulously recording her, as she frantically chopped, kneaded, and sautéed her way through an extravagant, rustic 8-course breakfast spread. I directed her to serve the massive feast to my mother-in-law, husband, and daughter, who were all waiting expectantly at the dining table. I squinted through the camera monitor, checking the framing and lighting, absolutely thrilled with the results. Perfect. The resemblance is uncanny, I murmured to myself. Lily's hands and my hands were practically identical. Identical skin tone, identical slender finger shape, identical nail beds. I had noticed the uncanny similarity the very first time we met, at a local fan meet and greet event. After that meeting, she had aggressively forced her way into my life. Her desperate intention to steal my husband and my lifestyle painted plainly across her face. I simply pretended to fall for her sycophantic flattery, quietly setting the trap and waiting for her to dive headfirst into it. I genuinely hadn't expected her to be so remarkably efficient. She followed the bait perfectly, ruined her own life, and fell into my snare, without delaying my production schedule by a single day. She grunted, struggling to carry a heavy cast iron Dutch oven full of simmering bone broth to the table. Her shoulders were slumped, and her forehead was beaded with sweat. Just as she raised a wrist to wipe her brow, I barked out an order. Cut. Lily, you have to make this look entirely effortless. You're supposed to be floating through the kitchen, not sweating like a line cook. Lily slammed the pot down, glaring at me with sheer unadulterated fury. I've been cooking non-stop for 2 solid hours. Of course I'm exhausted. What kind of human housewife has the physical stamina of an Olympic athlete? It is a script, Lily. It is fantasy. Please try to understand the vision, I sighed, offering her a condescending smile. Audiences eat this up right now. Just suffer through the exhaustion for a little bit, and it will make us a massive amount of money later. Lily took 2 deep shuddering breaths, violently rolled her eyes at me, but ultimately had no choice but to bite her tongue and get back to work. She was entirely broke, unemployed, and desperate because she had no job and had drained her savings trying to impress fake rich people. I magnanimously offered her an out. A job. She was to be my faceless hand double. She would cook the elaborate, from scratch meals in my videos, allowing me to seamlessly transition my online persona from idle ultra-rich wife to devoted, aesthetic tradwife. I hated cooking, I refused to learn, and frankly, managing the scriptwriting, video editing, and brand deals was already a full-time job. I desperately needed a physical proxy. When the grueling day of shooting finally wrapped, Lily collapsed onto my plush living room sofa, groaning in pain. Why couldn't you just keep shooting your luxury shopping vlogs? Why go through all this agonizing effort to pivot your entire brand? I didn't even bother looking up from my MacBook Pro. The macroeconomic environment has changed, Lily. You can't just flaunt wealth when people can't afford groceries. The content has to adapt. The economy is turbulent. Corporate burnout is at an all-time high, and thousands of women are either being laid off or voluntarily fleeing the workforce. Giving them this fantasy of an effortlessly perfect domestic housewife provides them with an aspirational reference point. I paused, tapping a key, or, at the very least, a digital placebo to soothe their anxiety. Lily, still clinging to her bruised ego, sneered defensively. Who says? There are plenty of highly ambitious career women out there. Not every woman secretly wants to run home, put on an apron, and be a pampered little tradwife. I stopped typing. I slowly closed my laptop, turned my head, and just stared at her in deafening silence. It took a few seconds, but the reality of her own actions caught up to her. Lily's face instantly flushed a brilliant, violently embarrassed shade of crimson, coming from the woman who had quite literally quit her job 2 weeks ago specifically to become a pampered little wife. Her argument lacked a certain degree of credibility. Over the next few consecutive days of grueling filming, the engagement metrics on our newly rebranded videos skyrocketed past all of my initial projections. It was a stroke of perfect timing, really, as the hyper-domesticated, traditional wife aesthetic was heavily trending across social media platforms in North America. The stark, jarring contrast between my previously established persona as an ultra-wealthy, idle socialite, and this new image of a devoted, from-scratch homemaker acted like a viral catalyst, sending the new content's numbers climbing exponentially. The comment sections were flooded with highly entertained viewers, joking about the shift in the economy. Wow! Even the Upper East Side billionaires are dealing with inflation and consumer downgrading. Now I have another excuse to justify using those cheap discount shopping apps. One top comment read, "Seizing the momentum." I immediately began pinning my Amazon storefront links and TikTok shop products directly below the videos, capitalizing on the traffic and aggressively taking on lucrative brand sponsorship deals for kitchenware and organic groceries. Lily, completely exhausted and covered in flour, absolutely couldn't handle the jarring pivot. "This is just way too grounded and relatable," she complained, wiping her forehead. "You've completely shattered that untouchable high society image you spent years building." Mia skipped into the kitchen, wearing an oversized Yale sweatshirt, and bumped her shoulder playfully against Lily's. "Oh, just listen to her, Lily. She knows exactly what she is doing." Zachary chimed in from the Marble Island, sipping a protein shake. "Victoria's instincts for the algorithm are lethal. She knows exactly what the audience is desperate to see right now." Lily froze, her eyes darting between the three of them. She let out a frustrated, dramatic groan. "You guys aren't even her real family. Why are you constantly taking her side and defending her?" It had taken Lily a few days of observation to finally figure it out. But she had realized that the people living in my apartment weren't just random actors. They were an entirely assembled, fake family unit, where everyone had their own distinct, fabricated backstory. "Because she is our boss, Lily. She pays our salaries." Josephine, my fake mother-in-law, had just finished shooting a sponsored post in the guest bedroom. She strolled out, casually twisting the heavy gold bracelet on her wrist. "She also acts as our agent and hooks us up with so many side gigs. That catalog ad for the mature women's boutique I just shot? Victoria negotiated the contract for me." Josephine's real name was actually Eleanor. Before she retired, she had been a strict high school literature teacher in New Jersey, and her own adult children had long since emigrated to Australia. Speaking of her past, Eleanor grew somewhat emotional. "A little over 3 years ago, a massive chunk of my retirement savings was wiped out by a sophisticated crypto and wellness supplement scam. I was far too embarrassed to tell my kids in Sydney, so I made an anonymous post on a local Facebook community board, attaching my photo and asking if anyone needed a nanny or a housekeeper. Victoria happened to scroll past my post. She reached out, told me I had an incredibly elegant, refined aura, and asked if I wanted to audition to play her wealthy mother-in-law. Since moving in, she has taught me how to shoot vlogs, how to model for print ads, and gives me a very generous commission cut." Eleanor looked over at me with genuine warmth. "Victoria, because of you, I've managed to build my savings back up significantly." I maintained a completely deadpan expression, giving her a slow, sarcastic golf clap. "Mahum. Well, you're doing great, Eleanor. Just try not to wire it all to a Nigerian prince this time." Mia bounded over, poking me in the side of the head. "Could you try saying something genuinely nice to Eleanor for once in your life?" Lily turned to the teenager, her curiosity piqued. "And what about you? How did you end up in this weird fake family?" Mia stuck her tongue out playfully. "Honestly, I was a terrible student. My study notes were gorgeously color-coded, heavily highlighted, and incredibly aesthetic, but absolutely none of the information actually stayed in my brain. When it came time for the SATs, I completely bombed them. I didn't get into any decent colleges, and my parents flat out refused to pay the exorbitant tuition for a low-tier community college, telling me to just go get a minimum wage job." She ran over and threw her arms around my neck, hanging off me like a koala. "Victoria found my aesthetic study notes and selfies on Instagram. She thought I looked young enough to play a high schooler, so she hired me to be her daughter, and designed this whole elite prep school study blogger persona for me. She even pays for my private tutors so I can take my GED, and eventually get a real online bachelor's degree." I shoved her off me, straightening my cashmere collar. "Back off, Chloe. Stop hanging on me. It is 1,000 degrees in here." Chloe, who played Mia, just laughed and pinched my cheek. "Victoria just gets shy when people are emotionally affectionate with her." Lily threw her hands up in the air, letting out a hysterical scream. "So after all of this, I'm the only person in this entire apartment who was actually scammed and manipulated into being here?" "Not exactly. A deep voice interrupted. Zachary, who had been quietly scrolling on his phone, looked up and flashed Lily a charming, self-deprecating wink. I got scammed into this too. Lily's heavily romanticized filter regarding Zachary had already shattered multiple times over the past week, but she truly hadn't expected it to shatter yet again. Excuse me? What do you mean? Lily gasped, horrified. You used to be a deadbeat. You dated a dozen girls at once in college. And you literally blackmailed your ex-girlfriends for cash using their nude photos. Zachary panicked, waving his hands frantically to shush her. Keep your voice down. Keep it down. It takes a lot of vulnerability to confess that. You don't have to scream it at the top of your lungs. Lily looked like she wanted to reach across the counter and slap him across his perfectly chiseled jaw. When we were sleeping together, were you secretly recording me too? She shrieked. I leaned against the refrigerator, my tone ice cold. No, he wasn't. He wouldn't dare try something that stupid in my house. I only turned a blind eye to you, two sleeping together, because there was mutual attraction. Not so he could build a blackmail folder to extort you. Zachary slumped dramatically onto the designer sofa, letting out a long pathetic sigh as he looked at me. It is tragic, really. My entire life is firmly trapped in the palm of her hand. Back when we were undergrads at NYU, I was just getting ready to make a move on her younger sister. Victoria caught wind of it before I even started. She systematically tracked down several girls on campus who had issues with me, organized them, and dragged me in front of the university's disciplinary board. She came dangerously close to having me thrown in federal prison. Zachary rubbed his face. Financial settlements, public apologies, deleting all the digital files. I did everything she demanded. Thank God, I never actually leaked those photos. Otherwise she would have absolutely made sure I rotted in a cell. Lily tilted her head, thoroughly confused by the dynamic. If you two are practically mortal enemies, why on earth are you pretending to be a happily married couple now? My fingers flew across my phone screen, answering emails at lightning speed. He begged me. I replied without looking up. Zachary awkwardly scratched the back of his neck. I completely screwed around during my undergrad, and with a massive disciplinary record permanently attached to my transcript, absolutely no respectable corporate firm would hire me. I have no family connections, no marketable skills, and I absolutely refuse to work a grueling blue-collar job. I tried to break into the entertainment industry, but that failed. I thought about trying to become a sugar baby for some wealthy Upper East Side cougar, but the horror stories I've heard scared me off. Lily visibly shuddered in disgust, taking a large, deliberate step away from him and closer to me. Eventually, I ran out of options. I was desperate. So, I thought of the one person who had completely ruined my life, yet was undeniably the most ruthless and capable person I knew, Victoria. Even back in college, she was already hustling, selling imported goods, and manipulating the social media algorithms. She understands business and she understands the law. So, I swallowed my pride and begged her for a job. She happened to need a male actor to play her husband for her new channel, so she let bygones be bygones. Victoria designed this entire thirst trap fitness influencer persona for me. She understands exactly what the platforms will tolerate, so she manages my content, makes sure my videos don't violate community guidelines, and keeps me profitable. In exchange, I take my shirt off, flex my abs in her vlogs, and help solidify her illusion of being a pampered wife with a hot husband. Lily poked me sharply in the arm. And you actually trust him enough to keep him around? People who want to build an empire don't sweat the small stuff. As long as he performs his job well, I don't care, I answered, still typing. And don't worry, I force him to get a full STD panel every 3 months to check for HIV and HPV. If we're going to share a workspace, I have to mitigate all health liabilities. Zachary let out an offended squawk. I only sleep with the women you specifically introduced me to. Okay. I'm incredibly cautious now. From the kitchen, both Chloe and Eleanor made loud, exaggerated gagging noises in unison. Suddenly, a thought struck Lily. Wait, you said all of this started because he was trying to hit on your sister. Aren't you worried that having him around will put her in danger? Zachary threw his hands up in sheer exasperation. I told you, she politically assassinated me on campus before I even had the chance to say hello. By the time her sister even knew my name, my reputation was completely destroyed. Besides, her sister has been living in Europe for years, managing Victoria's luxury importing business and shooting her vlog B-roll. She barely ever comes back to New York. Chloe clicked her tongue, shaking her head in admiration. Having a twin is honestly the ultimate life hack. Veronica can live in Paris and Milan, as an elite personal shopper, while simultaneously filming all the gorgeous vacation footage for Victoria's channel. They just splice the footage together. And because they look identical, the audience never even notices the difference. Lily's brain seemed to short-circuit, unable to process this new influx of information. What? What do you mean? A twin sister? I finally put my phone down, deciding to rip off the very last veil of my grand illusion. Every single one of those luxury European vacation vlogs. They were all filmed by my twin sister Veronica, while she was over there sourcing Birkins for clients. She majored in French and Italian, moved there on a student visa, and is currently in the process of securing a permanent work visa. As for me, I flashed Lily a wicked triumphant grin. I haven't left the 5 boroughs of New York City in my entire life. Lily's finger was trembling violently as she pointed at me. Then when you told me you were flying first class to that Swiss Alps retreat, where did you actually go? I walked over to the custom mahogany bookcase against the wall, pressed a hidden latch, and pushed the entire bookcase swung open smoothly, revealing a secret door that connected directly to the adjacent penthouse suite. I bought both units on this floor, and knocked the wall down. This side of the apartment is the active soundstage. I pointed to the impeccably decorated living room where Lily had believed I lived. I then pointed into the dark tech-filled room beyond the hidden door. And that side is the post-production studio. During the days you were playing house and sleeping with Zachary, I was sitting 10 feet away in that room, editing videos in sweatpants. Without waiting to watch Lily, completely turned to stone, I stepped through the hidden doorway to start cutting the raw footage from this morning's breakfast shoot. When I finally finished rendering the new video file, I pushed open the hidden bookcase door and stepped back onto the main set. I immediately heard Chloe pulling Lily aside, excitedly gossiping with her. You honestly have no idea how brilliant Victoria is at optimizing our budget, Chloe squealed. She told us a few weeks ago that not only were you going to act as her hand double, but you were also going to fund our end-of-year bonuses. Lily looked entirely bewildered. What are you talking about? You mean the luxury gifts I bought for you? Exactly. Chloe clapped her hands together. Joyfully, she told us that whatever we wanted, we should just drop hints to you, and you would go out and buy it with your own money. When Lily was ruthlessly scheming to steal my husband and usurp my life, she was willing to do absolutely anything to secure her position. I simply recognized a highly motivated asset and utilized it. Chloe's ridiculously expensive Japanese stationery, Eleanor's vintage Cartier jewelry. Lily had financed the entire operation out of her own pocket. Zachary, leaning against the counter, nodded in smug agreement. And as for my bonus gift, that was you. You actually thought you were some seductive mastermind, stealing her billionaire husband right from under her nose. In reality, she packaged you up, sold you to us, and you cheerfully counted the cash for her. Ha ha ha. Lily looked like she was teetering on the edge of a massive cardiac event. She looked like she desperately needed a nitroglycerin pill. I stepped fully into the living room, and the 4 of them immediately fell silent. 3 of them were biting their lips to suppress their laughter, while Lily was hyperventilating, inflating with rage like a blowfish. Victoria, you absolute psycho. I am going to. This was the very first time she had dropped the fake sweet nicknames and used my real name. I could practically hear her molars cracking as she ground her teeth together. The engagement metrics on the new videos are fantastic, and I recognize that your hands and your cooking are a massive part of that success, I said calmly, cutting her off. I maintained steady eye contact with her, and casually dropped a number into the tense air. Your performance bonus for this month's shooting schedule. $50,000. The entire luxury apartment plunged into an absolute pin-drop silence. I stood there and watched in real time as Lily forcibly swallowed the furious tirade she was about to unleash. I watched the violent, angry white of her complexion slowly flush into a warm, deeply embarrassed, yet incredibly eager shade of pink. "I am so incredibly lucky to be working for you," she blurted out, her tone doing a whiplash, inducing 180-degree turn. "Honestly, if you ever need someone to blindly manipulate and financially exploit again, please pick me. I am a totally willing participant." Our rebranded Tradwife account grew at an unprecedented rate. But inevitably, our meteoric rise attracted a high-profile rival, a notoriously arrogant trust fund kid, currently attending a massively expensive private university in New York, posted a viral video publicly calling me out. He claimed my sudden pivot to hawking Amazon kitchenware completely destroyed the inherent dignity of being ultra-wealthy. Oh my god. What kind of actual billionaire socialite needs to push affiliate links to make a quick buck? He sneered into the camera, waving a platinum Amex card. "You want to know why I don't sell cheap garbage to my followers? Because my father set up a trust fund that I couldn't drain in 3 lifetimes, even if I tried. Making money is for the working class." A few rational users in the comments quickly identified his university, pointing out that it was a notoriously corrupt institution, where wealthy parents essentially bought degrees, and that the return on investment for his education would be virtually non-existent. The trust fund heir responded with dripping, unbothered arrogance. "If you're so incredibly frugal and obsessed with climbing the corporate ladder, why don't you just submit your resume to my dad's hedge fund? We always need more analysts to do the grunt work." His unapologetically toxic, abrasive attitude generated a massive wave of controversial traffic. While many people dragged him in the comments for his repulsive elitism, an even larger demographic worshipped him. They praised him as an authentic old money heir, openly lamenting the cruel unfairness of capitalism, joking that their only hope for wealth was to hit the restart button on life and be born into a better family. Lily, who had recently developed an intensely fierce loyalty to our channel and her paycheck, registered a half-dozen burner accounts on Reddit and TikTok to wage a digital war against him. She returned an hour later, utterly defeated. "It is no use. We actually ran into a legitimate bulletproof trust fund baby this time. He doesn't care at all about public backlash or getting cancelled. And he is not afraid of the platforms banning his account," she complained. "I didn't even bother looking up from my spreadsheet. It is entirely deliberate. The more controversial he is, the more the algorithm pushes him. It is a textbook rage baiting tactic we mastered years ago." Lily shot up from the sofa, her eyes wide. "Wait, what? Are you saying his whole rich kid persona is fake too? Tell me exactly what to look for. I'm going to expose this fraud right now." I let out a dry, exasperated laugh. His identity and his trust fund are probably very real, but the narrative he is spinning is completely fabricated. I pulled up the heir's most recent TikTok. The video featured him popping a bottle of Dom Perignon on the hood of a McLaren, accompanied by an obnoxiously flashy caption. "My dad always knew I was a complete degenerate. He didn't send me to college to learn. He sent me here to purely enjoy the elite lifestyle. Armed with unlimited generational wealth, I genuinely do not even comprehend the concept of struggle or anxiety." I turned my phone screen toward Lily. "What is your read on this?" Lily stared at the aggressively arrogant caption, then looked back at me, her brow furrowing. "I don't know. There is something about this specific script. It feels weirdly familiar." We locked eyes, and both of us spoke in perfect cynical unison. Even the most powerful monarchs in history, people sitting at the absolute pinnacle of human power, still obsessed over things they couldn't have, like immortality. How could an ordinary human being, just because they have a massive bank account, possibly live a life completely devoid of friction, a life where every single desire is effortlessly met, with absolutely zero anxiety or setbacks? Ever since I was a little girl, observing the vast disparities in the world around me, I inherently understood that human beings were simply not born equal. Some were born into penthouses with trust funds, while others were born into suffocating poverty. However, despite this glaring inequality, there were exactly two things that gave me absolute, unwavering faith that a twisted form of universal fairness still existed, profound insecurity, and the inevitability of death. It didn't matter what kind of person you were, how much money you hoarded, or what elite circles you ran in. Every single human being on this earth was constantly suffering from the deeply ingrained insecurity of an unmet desire. And, regardless of who you were, every single person eventually had to face the terrifying, inescapable reality of death. Lily, having recently been brutally humbled by reality, had clearly learned her lesson and sharpened her analytical skills. She began pacing the living room, muttering as she deconstructed the rich kid's viral video. Given the current macroeconomic climate, running a massive enterprise is absolutely nowhere near as effortless as this idiot makes it sound. The commercial real estate market is on the verge of a catastrophic collapse. Massive tech conglomerates are slashing thousands of jobs in brutal layoff waves. Who on earth is his father? What kind of mythical billionaire can guarantee a lifetime of zero corporate friction? I nodded, highly approving of her newfound critical thinking, and pushed the analysis further. Exactly. And think about it from a legacy perspective. As a self-made, ruthless entrepreneur who fought tooth and nail to build an empire, who would his father genuinely want as an heir? Would he want a highly competent, battle-tested successor who can navigate a corporate crisis, someone like an Ivanka Trump or a Marta Ortega? Or do you honestly think he prefers having a completely useless, entitled prince who burns through cash to buy a watered-down degree, only to spend his days running his mouth on the internet, turning their family business into a massive target for public outrage? Lily crossed her arms, her face flushing with indignant anger. A literal golden retriever would make a better corporate heir than him. Spot on. I agreed, clapping my hands together sharply. Therefore, we can easily deduce that his life is absolutely not as flawless and perfectly fulfilled as he is desperately trying to boast online. I leaned back into the velvet cushions, my tone growing distinctly philosophical. Human desire is a bottomless, unfillable void. It starts with the basics: massive wealth, absolute power, elite social status. Then, it aggressively expands to demanding perfect health, an unnaturally extended lifespan, and total control over others. Even if this kid manages to secure all the money in the world, he will inevitably crave something he can't buy. For instance, the desire to become entirely immortal, the desperate urge to conquer the passage of time, or the obsessive need to ensure his bloodline survives forever, like boarding a modernized Noah's Ark to sail into the next century, reaching a utopia where time itself cannot touch him. The sprawling living room suddenly plunged into a heavy contemplative silence. My fabricated family members had slowly gathered around the kitchen island, staring at me with solemn, deeply affected expressions. I paused for a brief moment, feeling the weight of their stares, but I forced myself to finish the thought. Because human desire is infinite, it is mathematically impossible for all of them to be fully satisfied. And the moment a desire remains unmet, deep-seated insecurity is born. Therefore, those obnoxious influencers who loudly brag that their lives are effortless and flawless are doing nothing but lying through their teeth, deliberately attempting to provoke mass jealousy, to soothe their own hidden inadequacies. They are coldly exploiting the darkest, most vulnerable corners of human nature, purely to harvest engagement and eyeballs. I let out a slow, self-deprecating sigh. Exactly like I have been doing for years. I offered the room a bitter, entirely humorless smile. For the sake of amassing a fortune, I had ruthlessly buried my true self and my actual moral compass for far, far too long. I had surgically castrated my own authentic desire to speak the truth, aggressively pandering to the twisted, materialistic values of the internet. I had packaged myself into a glossy, superficial product, spouting shameless lies to an audience of millions, all while raking in an absolute fortune. Zachary stood frozen by the counter, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously as he swallowed hard. It took him a long, agonizing moment before he finally spoke, his voice incredibly hoarse. Listening to you say all of that. It just violently reminded me of exactly how you used to be back when we were in college. Back in our university days, I had been a fiercely outspoken activist. I was constantly pointing out systemic injustices, writing passionate op-eds, and acting with a fiery, righteous indignation, because I had personally clawed my way out of grueling unfairness. I had weaponized my academic knowledge, treating it as a blade to fight for those who couldn't, but looking at my perfectly manicured hands and the ring light in the corner. What exactly was I doing with my life now? Laughing softly at my own glaring hypocrisy. I slowly lowered my head, unable to meet their eyes. Chloe, her usually bubbly voice uncharacteristically thick and quiet, hesitantly broke the silence. So Victoria, do you still feel insecure? What is your deepest desire now? That single innocent question violently yanked me backward into the darkest, most suffocating nightmares of my childhood. In my mind's eye, the towering jagged peaks of the Appalachian Mountains began to roll and heave around me. Rising up like a massive inescapable tide of suffocating green and gray, I was back sitting on a dilapidated, rust-eaten Greyhound bus, feeling the terrifying sensation that no matter how fast the engine screamed, I would never ever be able to outrun the endless oppressive wilderness. The deep shadowy ravines between the mountains seemed to yawn open like the massive jaws of a beast. If I slowed my pace for even a fraction of a second, I would be entirely swallowed whole, erased from existence. My twin sister and I had spent our entire youth running. We ran desperately to escape the crushing poverty of those isolating mountains. We ruthlessly severed every single toxic parasitic blood tie that tried to anchor us down, legally changed our names to erase our past, and fought with feral intensity to permanently root ourselves in the cold, unforgiving concrete and steel of New York City. Modern civilization, with its strict laws and predictable order, was the ultimate sanctuary for the weak and vulnerable. We had sworn a blood oath to each other. We would never, under any circumstances, leave the safety of the metropolis. I snapped back to reality, plastering my signature, flawless, carefree smile back onto my face. I looked directly at Chloe and calmly named the bleak, opioid-ravaged mountain town I was born in. My deepest insecurity is the fact that I was born into the dirt of that specific zip code, and my ultimate desire is to hoard so much money that the universe can never ever force me to go back. Chloe stared at me, completely stunned into silence. Eleanor's eyes widened in genuine shock. Wait, I know that region. The local dialect and the heavy drawl out there are incredibly distinct. How is it that your diction is absolutely perfect? You don't have even the slightest trace of a regional accent. I just practiced in front of a mirror until my throat bled, I said, offering a nonchalant, breezy shrug, making it sound as though aggressively ironing out my own tongue was the simplest, most mundane task in the world. Lily remained incredibly quiet, absorbing the massive revelation. After a long, heavy silence, she finally spoke, her tone surprisingly firm. Victoria, everything you've actually done with your life, building a business, legally protecting yourself, escaping poverty, is the absolute definition of an empowered independent woman. Yet, your entire online empire is aggressively built on promoting a helpless dependent tradwife narrative. Hey, I kept the bright, unbothered smile plastered on my face. It's purely business, Lily. To survive and thrive in this brutal capitalist system, I had deliberately chosen the most highly controversial, highly trafficked aesthetics available. It was precisely because I possessed such a cynical, piercing understanding of human weakness that I was able to carve out an incredibly lucrative path for myself. And what about the future? Lily pressed, taking a step toward me. Are you just going to keep churning out this specific type of content? I threw my hands up in a dismissive gesture. What else am I supposed to do? The masses only want to consume what validates their own biases. They only believe the comforting lies they desperately want to be true. Compared to watching the grim, exhausting reality of a corporate drone working 80 hours a week, the public infinitely prefers the soothing, effortless fantasy of a pampered, wealthy housewife. Real life is already crushing them. I am not in the business of trying to lecture my audience on feminist theory. Lily's face flushed a deep, furious crimson. But this kind of highly curated propaganda actually ruins lives. I am living proof of that. I fully believed your videos. You completely weaponized this fantasy to manipulate me. To be completely honest, I used to harbor a lot of deep hatred for you because of it. But then you turned around and gave me a massive career opportunity. You were the one who forced me to realize that women cannot ever abandon their financial independence, and we absolutely cannot place our survival entirely in the hands of a man. If we keep intentionally mass-producing this tradwife content, millions of vulnerable women are going to willingly throw away their careers and step right into a domestic trap. What happens to them? It is not like every scammed woman is going to magically bump into a Victoria who hands them a second chance at a career. Her words struck a very raw, sensitive nerve. For the first time in years, a sharp, uncomfortable pang of genuine guilt pierced through my carefully constructed armor. I fell silent for a moment before defensively snapping back. Well, that is absolutely not the fault of my videos. I am simply mirroring the current macroeconomic and political climate. Society is aggressively pushing propaganda for women to return to the kitchen to boost declining birth rates. Men actively want women out of the corporate sector to drastically reduce workplace competition. And frankly, there are plenty of women out there who are genuinely exhausted, who don't want to fight the corporate grind, and who simply want to marry rich and be taken care of. I did not engineer these massive societal failures. I am merely riding the profitable wave. Lily wasn't backing down. You have massive online traffic. You understand content creation better than anyone. You actually have the power to shift the cultural narrative. I let out a loud theatrical groan, rolling my eyes to the ceiling. Oh, please spare me the righteous savior complex. I do not have that kind of messianic ability. From the sidelines, Zachary casually tossed a lit match onto the powder keg. Hey Lily, if you're so passionately convicted about this, why don't you try writing a completely new content strategy? Draft a new persona for Victoria. If the script is actually engaging and profitable, maybe she'll agree to shoot it. Lily spun around, her eyes blazing with determination as she marched furiously toward the editing suite. Fine. Challenge accepted. Watch me write it. Epilogue. I used to spend hours lying in bed, obsessively fantasizing about actually being Victoria, but in reality, I am just Lily, the incredibly naive, foolish girl who got completely played and manipulated in circles. I didn't manage to write a brilliant paradigm-shifting video strategy overnight. In fact, I am still currently working as Victoria's uncredited hand double, meticulously baking sourdough and chopping vegetables for her viral tradwife TikToks. Perhaps I simply don't possess the inherent cutthroat genius required for high-level video production. However, my own humiliating, eye-opening journey made me utterly desperate to do something. Every single day, staring at the comment section beneath our videos filled me with a suffocating, unbearable sense of moral guilt. I am so incredibly burnt out at my accounting firm. I just want to quit and be a pampered tradwife like you. See, ladies, this is proof. Grinding at a 9 to -5 is useless compared to just marrying a wealthy alpha provider. Manifesting this. Universe, please send me a handsome multi-millionaire tech husband exactly like hers. Reading those comments made the anxiety bubble up so violently that I actually developed stress sores on my lips. But I lacked the power to completely override Victoria's highly profitable content strategy. I tried using my anonymous burner accounts to desperately reply to these women, trying to warn them of the financial dangers, but I was instantly mass downvoted and viciously cyberbullied by her fans, called a bitter, jealous poor person hating on a billionaire. Jealous. I wanted to scream at my screen. I'm literally the one cooking the food in the video. When my direct approach failed spectacularly, I pivoted. I decided to try my hand at writing fiction. I had read online that writing a serialized short story had a slightly lower barrier to entry than drafting an entire novel. So completely exhausted after my long shifts in the studio kitchen, I began anonymously publishing chapters on Reddit and Substack, writing furiously in fragmented bursts over the course of a month. heavily editing and deleting scenes late into the night. I eventually produced the 14 chapters you just read. In the story, I deliberately wrote the narrative from the first-person perspective of the woman I admired most, Victoria. I poured every single detail into the text: how I was utterly scammed, how I eventually joined the underground production studio, and all the brutal, empowering philosophies I had absorbed during my time in this bizarre fake family. I desperately tried to put myself in Victoria's incredibly sharp, cynical mindset, actively searching for a completely new empowering direction for our channel's future. When the draft was finally complete, I nervously printed the manuscript and handed it to the real-life Victoria. She leaned back in her designer chair, speed-reading the pages, and immediately started roasting me. Setting everything else aside, Victoria deadpanned, tapping the paper. "Why on earth did you change my character's name to Catherine? And why did you name the himbo Grigory?" Grigory Potemkin was, famously, the historically renowned lover and subservient military commander whose entire existence revolved around serving his master, the legendary Empress Catherine the Great. I offered her a cheeky, unapologetic grin. "Well, you are an incredibly powerful, calculating woman. And Zachary is basically a subservient boy toy constantly desperate for your approval." I thought the historical parallel was actually perfect. Victoria simply rolled her eyes, her lips twitching in annoyance, sensing she was deliberately trying to deflect from the emotional core of the story. I cut straight to the chase, asking the only question that actually mattered. "So, what do you genuinely think of the writing? Did I actually capture your true voice? Did I understand your philosophy?" Victoria slowly stood up from her desk. She paused for a long, torturous moment, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the Manhattan skyline. Finally, she offered a slow, incredibly begrudging nod of approval. "It is decent." As she turned to walk out of the room, I yelled out after her, "If this story goes viral and gets thousands of upvotes, it proves that the audience actually agrees with my message. If that happens, promise me we can officially pivot the channel. We can start producing content for ambitious, independent career women, and help pull them out of the trad wife trap." Victoria paused in the doorway. She slowly turned her head and flashed me a wide, incredibly exasperated grimace. "This little story of yours is probably going to completely flop in the algorithm. Let's wait and see if anyone on the internet actually bothers to give you a like before we start entirely restructuring my multi-million-dollar business."
That's all for today. I'm Lina. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories every week. Thanks for watching.